The following program was paid for by the friends and partners of Kyle Winkler Ministries.
We're all successful whenever we use the gifts God has given us to complement each other and spur each other on, not to compete to be each other. A couple weeks ago, I was telling you about that story about how I was comparing myself to all these other ministers. Anytime I go to a conference or watch something on a podcast or watch TV or read a book and I'd see somebody else, I'd try to figure out what is their secret sauce to their success and think that maybe if I implement it in what I do, that I would find the same success as them. And so I had all these needs, as I said. Oh, maybe I need to have more humor. I need to tell more stories. I need to use more props. I need to have signs and wonders. I was just daunted by all of these. I need. And finally God said, why don't you just be you? He said, I've given you a personality, a style, and a story to reach people that others can't with theirs. Use the gift of you. And that's a word for us all. But I want to kind of look at a little bit different take on that than I did a couple weeks ago. That was really a monumental point that I had to learn in my life. And that is learning how to live in and love the lane that God has put me in. Now, do you understand what I mean by lane? You know, like a road has a lane with boundary markers on each side to help keep you inside on the way to where you're going. Well, a spiritual lane includes the giftings and the callings and the talents, everything that God has given you. And learning to love it and live in it is learning to stay within it so you don't stray into somebody else's lane, or you don't look at somebody else's lane and say, oh man, I really want that lane because that lane looks like the fast lane and I want to be on the fast lane. And it also might mean that you're not preoccupied with telling somebody else how to drive in their own lane, that you stay focused in the area that God has called you to. Because I tell you what, in ministry, I have seen people make a total wreck of themselves and their ministries when they get outside of the calling that God has called them into. Now, this has been a hard lesson for me to learn. And I have had to learn it and relearn it and learn it and relearn it over and over and over again. Because, especially I think as a young minister, now I know that we deal with this at any age, but doing what I'm doing and starting at a young age, there's always been the temptation of looking at somebody else who's where I want to be, or who has what I want to have, who's living the dream that I want to live, and maybe eventually getting envious of what they have right now. Or maybe even worse is looking at somebody that's your own age, who might be seemingly more accomplished, and wondering, why do they get those opportunities? Why do they get that car? Why do they get that house? Why do they get that spouse? Why do they seem better at this and that than me? If you're in that position, whether it's in ministry or whether it's in any other area of life, because we deal with this in every area of life, but if you're in that position, if you don't deal with this thing, then I'm telling you, it will eat you up alive. When you compare yourself to somebody else, you will always lose. You will always feel like you're never good enough. You will always feel like you are chasing this dangling carrot that you can never totally get to. So if you actually want to have some peace, you actually want to have some joy and enjoy your life right here and now, then you have to learn how to find success in the gifts that you have and how to celebrate the gifts of other people. The Bible has a lot of warnings about this thing that it calls coveting, which is basically just wanting what somebody else has, lusting after what somebody else has, craving, desiring what somebody else has. And I'm not going to go into all the warnings that the Bible gives. You can look those up yourself. Just look in a topic under envy and you'll find them. But one of the most famous ones probably is the last of the 10 Commandments from Exodus 20:17. And it says, you must not covet your neighbor's house. You must not covet your neighbor's wife, male or female servant. You must not covet their ox or donkey or anything else that belongs to your neighbor. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never looked at my neighbor's ox and said, oh man, they've got a really nice ox. I want that ox. But I have said, oh, I would like that car. Look at that car. Why did they get that car? I want that car. And that might be at least the modern day equivalent to the ox or the donkey was back then. But God doesn't just give his people these laws and these rules. He just didn't give these commandments just to put burdens on his people just for the fun of it, just to watch them squirm and just to limit them. But really, when you look at the commandments and the law that God has given, it was always to protect his people. It was always to help them be better, or so that they didn't slip into something a whole lot worse. And when he's talking about not coveting, not wanting, not desiring what somebody else has, he's helping us from slipping down this road of what ends up being jealousy and bitterness and resentment. And people that are jealous and bitter and resentful for so long, eventually it leads to all-out hatred towards the person that has what you want. And I tell you what, there have been so many horrible things done to people, horrible things spoken about people, because somebody else, the person speaking or doing those things, was at the root jealous that that person had or had a lifestyle or whatever, something that they wanted. Now, certainly coveting and wanting what somebody else has isn't anything new. It goes all the way back to Cain and Abel, Adam and Eve's, some of Adam and Eve's sons at least. Cain cultivated the land, the Bible says, and Abel was a shepherd. That was their jobs. And so it says that when the time came for the harvest and they needed to bring an offering to the Lord, well, Abel brought the best portions, it says, of the firstborn of his flock. But Cain brought some of his produce. God accepted Abel's offering, but God did not accept Cain's. And there are various reasons for that, and that's a whole other message. But the Bible does say that Cain had the opportunity to make it right, but instead, what did he do? He chose to go deeper and deeper and deeper into resentment and envy over his brother, that God had accepted him, but God did not accept me. And it worked out in the worst way, ultimately. Cain killed Abel. And we struggle with that kind of envy ourselves. It's really over maybe a certain job that somebody has, or the results and the rewards of their job, or their status before God. Miriam, Moses' sister, was jealous of her brother because, why does God only talk to him? Can't the rest of us hear from God? And she was envious of how God used him, and we get envious of people in the same way. Why is God using them like that? Why did God give them that gifting? Why does God give them that wisdom and not me? Or Saul and David. Saul said, they talk about David having slayed tens of thousands, but they only talk about me having slayed thousands. And the Bible says from that day forward, Saul had a jealous eye on David, and it caused him to do all kinds of wild things. And that's just a jealousy of success, of somebody else's success. That's why the question really is, not can you be friends with somebody in their lowest points, but can you be friends with somebody at their highest points? Can you be friends with somebody when they're experiencing success and not get bitter and resentful and wonder, why is God doing that for them and not for me? As I said, this is nothing new, but it is at an all-time high, I think, today, because we are constantly having what we don't have always put in front of us because of this little thing called social media. I've had counselors tell me that when somebody comes into their office with symptoms of depression, that the first thing that they'll tell them to do these days is to take a social media fast. Get away from it for a little while. Now, I understand that there are a lot of causes for depression, and I'm not trying to lump everything into all of this, but the truth of the matter is, in many cases, people feel blue about their lives because they are constantly dissatisfied with their lives, because they are always looking into the highlights of what it looks like somebody else has behind a screen or from a picture. The average American, the stats show, spends 10 hours a day behind a screen. And how much do you think of that as just looking and swiping and swiping and swiping? I mean, I've caught myself more times than I want to admit. In bed at night, just going through. 45 minutes later, just being nosy at somebody else's life. And I don't know about you, but doesn't it just seem like everybody on social media, just their life is just always made? It's like they're jet setting across the world on the best vacations. They're always moving into the nicest houses, and they have the best families with the biggest smiles. And it's always like the greatest opportunities. And meanwhile, we're sitting in our 15-year-old mattress, swiping, looking, oh, isn't that great for them? Oh, well, that's really good for them. Oh, how nice is that? Meanwhile, we're getting all insecure about, what about me? Why not me? But here's the truth. That's probably what you think is their life, probably isn't their life. Their life probably isn't as good as you think it is. As a matter of fact, they're probably sitting behind their cracked iPhone screen, feeling the same insecurities you're feeling, and trying to overcompensate for those insecurities by posting all these great pictures. And that's how this vicious cycle continues. We get insecure, and oh man, I'd really like to feel accepted, and I'd really like to feel liked today, so I'm going to post this great picture of all these things that I'm doing, and oh, now I got a few likes, and isn't that great? And now I feel good, until you swipe down a little bit more and you see somebody else that seems to have a better life than you, and it just starts all over again. You know, I did this test on social media a few months ago where I was at a speaking engagement, and the pastor and his team had invited me out to go golfing with them. And, you know, I like to golf, but I'm not good. And before that time, I think it had been like 5 or 6 years when I thought about it before I had golfed, or since the last time I had golfed. And so I am not a golfer, but I posted a picture like I was. I had the polo shirt tucked into the white pants with the golf shoes and the golf hat and the golf gloves with my putter post in the green, looking like a professional. And you should have seen the comments that I got. Some people said, oh, we didn't know you golf. Oh, come golfing with us sometime. Oh, living the dream. And people made an assumption about my life based on one picture that they saw, which was not reality. The reality beyond that picture was all the swings and the misses that I made, was all the putts that went way across the hole or way beyond the hole. And I'm sure people looked at that thing, and some people probably compared their life to what they thought was mine and thought, oh, well, isn't that great? Look at him, he gets to do all this stuff. But it wasn't reality. You know, we deal with this stuff in different ways. As I said, what the counselors sometimes suggest, some people take a fast, they get away from it for a while, but some people press that fun little unfollow button. You know, the one that you click that hides what somebody posts, but it doesn't unfriend them, because that would be the most offensive thing to do these days. Heaven forbid we unfriend somebody. And I'm guilty. You know, sometimes it seems like these messages are more of a confessional of my life to you than anything else, but I'm not just trying to talk about myself all the time, but I really just hope that some of the things that I've learned and some of the pain that I've been through that you can relate to and maybe realize you're not the only one and that there's hope for you. But one time I was swiping through all the social media, and there was an old friend or acquaintance or something of mine that was popping up, and he had just gotten into a new relationship. And, you know, if it would have been one picture of him and his new girlfriend, that'd have been fine. I'd have been, isn't that nice? Okay. Oh, but no, it had to be every picture, multiple times a day, many days. And finally, I'm just like, this is enough of this. Unfollow. And it didn't take a second for me to hear, you know, better than unfollowing him would be for you to get satisfied about your life, the life that I've given you. You know, that hurt to hear, but it was true. Because the truth is you can't hide under a rock forever. You can't hide out forever. Eventually, you have to deal with this stuff, because if it's not on social media, it'll be in your family. It'll be at your workplace where you can't hide out and you just don't have an easy little unfollow button to press, that you finally have to confront some of these things. You cannot mask the symptoms forever. Eventually, you have to deal with the root, which is not loving the life that God has given you. Are you with me? And I have learned some lessons that just in the last part of this message, I really want to share with you about how I have learned to be happy in the lane that I'm in and how you can too. And one of the first things you have to do is you have to get a new definition for success. When I was studying for this message and I looked up the different definitions of success, I was fascinated with how success has changed over the years. In the 1828 Webster's Dictionary, it defines success as the favorable or prosperous termination or conclusion of anything attempted. And today, the first definition is similar. It's the accomplishment of an aim or a purpose. But now there's a second definition, which means the attainment of popularity or profit. For years, success has been purely defined as the completion of a purpose. And that can be different for different people. But now, because of all the things that I just mentioned before, this other second definition has creeped in, and it's probably the primary definition of success for so many people: popularity or profit. And if that is your definition for success, then there is no room for uniqueness of calling. It's either you're rich or you're not. You have or you don't have. You're popular or you're not popular. You're successful or you're not successful. There's no room for any uniqueness. So if you're going to want to have peace for your life, if you're going to want to truly enjoy your life, you got to get away from those definitions of success, of popularity, and just numbers-based things, and you actually have to get a definition that God has. What does God say is success? Which is obedience to His word. It's obedience to the calling that He has given you. It's not what the world has. It's not what even might seem right to you or what might seem right according to the culture or even the church culture. Hear this. Success to God is you doing what God has asked you to do. You know, Saul had to learn this the hard way, and he really lost the kingdom over this whole deal. 1 Samuel 15 tells the story of Saul being in a conquest, and God told him to destroy everything. But instead, Saul thought it would be a good idea to keep the best of the plunder. And when I read the story, it looked like Saul had pretty good intentions in doing this. He said that he wanted to keep the best, to offer and sacrifice the best to the Lord. But when Samuel confronted him, Samuel took a pin to his balloon. And look at this. In 1 Samuel 15:22, Samuel says, "What is more pleasing to the Lord? Your burnt offerings and sacrifices, or your obedience to His voice? Listen," Samuel said, "obedience is better than sacrifice." And we need to ask ourselves the same thing. What is better? All the numbers that you can get for God? All the butts that you can get in the seats? All the money that you can get into the account? All the books that you can sell? All the social media likes? Or is it doing what God has asked you to do even if it doesn't look as good numerically or is as popular? Now, I have had to have a conversation with some ministers and even really think about it myself, because a lot of people in the church world think that in order to be a successful pastor or have a successful church, the church has to reach a certain number. Or in order to be a successful evangelist, you have to fill stadiums. Otherwise, you're just not quite there. But I think the real truth is that we need small church pastors. And we need those people that speak to tens or hundreds and not thousands. They have a purpose too. You know, Mordecai Ham was the man that led young Billy Graham to the Lord. And if you were to compare both of their ministries on paper, it would look like Billy's was hugely more successful than Mordecai's. But Billy was called to reach millions, but Mordecai was called to reach Billy. They both had their purpose, and they both lived within their purpose, and they were both successful in God's eyes to that. So hear this, minister. Success to you might be faithfully serving a church of 50. You who are in the workplace, success might be being a consistent and pure witness to Christ to your coworkers, living it day in and day out. Moms and dads, success might not be something that you do, but it might be someone you raise. Success might not be the money you make, but it might be the memories that you make. Be sure that you are not using some other person's measuring stick that's only meant to measure them, or some other person's definition of success. What has God called you to do? And if you're doing that, if you're in the process of doing that, then you are successful right here and right now. Not later when you achieve or receive, but right here and right now. Now, going back to that story I mentioned at the beginning of me comparing myself. When I had first started the ministry, I had really started with interviews of people that had had some profound stories of the power of God. And so what that meant was I had a certain circle of people that was around me and that I became friends with. And largely they were healing ministers and people in the prophetic and people in signs and wonders ministries, which are awesome. And I love that kind of stuff. But what I eventually found was that because of the company that I kept, when I would go places, people kind of expected me to do that kind of thing as well. And so I always felt this pressure that I needed to operate in that way, as good as it is and as necessary as it is, but I felt the pressure that I needed to do that. Otherwise, I was letting these places down. And it just never really felt like it was me. I just never really felt like I fit with that. And you know, when you are around something for so long, you don't quite feel like you fit in with it. Eventually you'll wonder, what is wrong with me? Or you'll try to strive to be something that doesn't just quite work. And I was comparing myself and saying, man, maybe I'm just a failure. Maybe I'm just not good at this. Maybe I just need to do something else. And finally God said to me, he said, Kyle, yes, they can do things that you can't, but you can also do things that they can't. This isn't about one gift being better than the other. It's about using them all and complementing each other in this thing that we call the body of Christ. And that was a new freedom for me. Because, you know, I'm a teacher. This is what I do. This is the lane that I'm in. You know, if God chooses to change that and open up other things down the road, that's fine. I'm open to that. But I am really happy where I am. And people have tried to put pressures on me saying, oh, maybe you should do this, or maybe you should be open for this. But I'm just really happy here. And so I finally felt like I had freedom and permission to be me. And I tell you what, ministry became a whole lot easier when I was operating out of the gifts God had given me and the lane God had put me in than trying to be in somebody else's lane. And this is what Paul said to the Romans when they were kind of battling out, comparing each other's gifts in Romans 12, 4-9. He said, just as our bodies have many parts and each part has a special function, so it is with Christ's body, with this thing we call the church. And he goes on, in his grace, God has given us different gifts for doing certain things well. Not the same gifts to do all the same things well, different gifts. And then he goes on with this list. If God has given you the ability to prophesy, speak out with as much faith as you have. If your gifting is serving others, serve them well. If you're a teacher, teach them well. And he goes on from that. But this is why identity, what I was talking especially about in the first week, is so important. Because when you know who you are, then you know what to do. If I know that I'm a mind or a mouth in the kingdom of God, then I'm going to be most successful and going to be happiest and glorifying God the most when I'm doing what I was made to do, which was think or speak. But if I'm a mouth and I try to do what a hand does and try to pick things up, I'm going to fail regardless how hard I try. And if I'm a hand, I can do great things and I can maybe heal and comfort and I can give handouts and I can help people. But I will always fail if I try to talk with my hand. This is why Paul said, God has given us different gifts to do certain things well. We're all successful whenever we use the gifts God has given us to complement each other and spur each other on, not to compete to be each other. And I'm going to say that one more time. We are all successful when we use what we have to complement each other, not to compete to be each other. Now, as I close here, let me just tell you this one last little story. When David went out to face Goliath, Saul gave him his armor, but Saul's armor was too big for David. And so instead of David going out and putting on armor that didn't fit him or trying to find somebody else's that might have fit a little bit better, David went out with what he had. The Bible says he went quickly to the battle line. David was successful in what God had called him to do, using what God had given him. And you are successful when you use what God has given you, your personality, your style, your story, your giftings, your abilities to do what God has called you to do, not to use what somebody else has to do, what somebody else has been called to do. The world doesn't need a duplicate of somebody else. The world needs you being uniquely you, and you satisfied being uniquely you. So be the person that God had in mind when he designed you. Learn to live in and love the lane that God has put you in. You just listened to one teaching in my 4-part series on the gift of you. Are you afraid of people knowing your struggles? Do you battle with comparison? Ever despised your weaknesses, personality, or physical features? Who hasn't? Today, insecurity is at an all-time high. Added to the all too familiar battles that come with being human, we are constantly bombarded with images and messages that make us feel like we just don't measure up. But God's not looking for perfection, nor is he looking for you to look or act like everybody else. No, God created you to be unique for a unique purpose. So to help you break free from insecurity, to truly value the gift of you, today we're offering my 4-part audio series where I reveal how to get comfortable in your own skin and love who you are, flaws and all. This series includes 4 confidence-building messages: discovering the true you, loving your weaknesses, living in and loving your lane, and the masterpiece in the mirror. I know what it's like to not like yourself, to be ashamed of things about you, and to live in comparison with other people. But I've also experienced the freedom that comes from learning to celebrate my unique personality, style, and story. And I want to teach you how to live in this freedom yourself. Are you ready to kick insecurity to the curb? Then go online to kylewinkler.org/gift-of-you and get my The Gift of You series on CD or MP3 for a gift of only $25. Order now and be on your way to discovering your purpose and living it out with boldness and confidence.
I opened up the Shut Up Devil app many times a few months ago when I was going through severe cancer.
Kyle's ministry has spoke life into me at a time where I almost quit believing in myself.
Kyle's ministry does a fantastic job encouraging you midweek.
And I really started to understand that God had a plan and he had a purpose directly for me.
Ultimately, the goal of the Christian life is not for you to become a husband, for you to become a wife, for you to become a parent, for you to come to any kind of brand of political thought. It's not for you to become anything except to become more and more and more and more and more like Jesus.